You know, before 1900, the physical health of people in the world was very bad. So back then, if before 1900, if someone would say to their neighbor, "Oh yeah, we had a plague and all these people died, and my friend got a cut and got gangrene from it, lost his arm." There was very bad sanitation. They didn't understand about germs. The treatments they had, they would drill holes in people's heads and they'd use leeches, and they really had no understanding of a physical illness and what the source of physical illness was and what the cure was. So the people were dying from contaminated water, and communicable diseases were very prevalent. It was a very, very difficult time looking at it from here, but for them that was just normal. They didn't see any problem. They just figured, well, the bodies are frail, and there's a life expectancy levels are not very high, or they are what they were, and infant mortality was very very high because they used the same because they didn't know about germs. They'd use the same instruments to deliver babies as they did to work on cadavers. So back in that time, it was normal for people to die early, to be sick a lot, to have bad health. Okay? Germ theory comes around, and this is a brand new understanding of physical health. Okay, it was a brand new paradigm, a brand new foundation. And then everything was changed by that. So they started sterilizing instruments. They started paying attention to sanitation. There was the development of antibiotics. And the level of health in the world made this dramatic jump. And all of a sudden, people are living longer, and life expectancy is better, and people feel better all the time. So it was an interesting case of a normal that was pretty low in terms of people not being very healthy. And then later, there's a normal where when people are sick now, they say, wait a minute, I'm sick, I better go get treatment. People's vision for their physical health is very high. I think this is a wonderful analogy to the issue of mental well-being and mental health. Okay, because I would say that the level of mental well-being and mental health in the world, in this country as well, is very low. Why do I say that? Because people accept stress. You go to someone, like if you went to someone back in the 1800s and said, "Gee, I heard you died from an infection," they'd say, "What's your point?" Okay. If you say to someone now, "Gee, you look like you're really stressed out," they say, "What's your point?" What do you? It's just accepted. A high level of stress is accepted. As a matter of fact, I think the media in the world would say that the level of stress has gone up, the level of distress, the number of psychotropic drugs that are being used, all the numbers, the divorce rate, 50% is the divorce rate. And people accept that. If you talk to people, get it, well, what are you going to do with it? 50% divorce rate. It's the same way they were back then about, being poisoned by the water that they were drinking. People say, well, that's just a reality. So people have accepted that the reality is high levels of stress and high levels of distress. And just like in the physical health area, what was missing was an understanding, the proper understanding of the germs in the body and the relationship between them. They didn't understand health issues. And in the case of stress, which is the subject of this DVD, I'm going to suggest to you that the reason that the level is low, mental well-being is low, the level of stress is high, is because people don't understand where stress comes from, what it is. They don't have an understanding. And instead of drilling holes in people's heads like they did back then, they're using all these, different techniques. And because they don't understand it, they haven't been able to lower the level of stress. Well, this DVD will present an understanding of stress and that understanding has paved the way for people to have very low stress lives and very high expectations for their own well-being. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of that and talk about the new understanding that we have about how stress is created and what it takes to take on less stress, I'd like to define stress and talk about the present model that they have, the present understanding that the world is using, and contrast this with this other model. Now, in defining stress, I'd like to say two things. The first one is, when I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about experienced stress. I'm talking about stress as an experience, something that a person feels. And just to make it simple, let's say it's a sense of tension and pressure, that they feel tense, they feel pressured. That would be a definition of stress. See? So when we're talking about stress, we're not talking about a stressful situation. We're talking about what actually the person feels inside themselves. Okay? So if a person feels stress, tension, you'd say, oh, they have stress. Okay? The other thing is, I know there's discussions about how much stress is enough and too much, and is stress good or is it not so good? Well, by the definition I'm positing, stress is not a good thing. Okay, it's not, a lot of it is better than less of it, but even a little bit is not a good thing. There's no value to stress the way I'm defining it, because if you look at people and they're tense, they don't do so well. You take a person that's going to go in to take an exam, and they get tense, they don't do well. Okay? It doesn't take much tension for a person to, lose a couple of strokes in their golf swing. It doesn't take very much tension for a foul shooter in basketball to miss a shot. You can take any person, and whatever they don't do very well, if you listen to them, they'll say there's a certain amount of tension in that for me. Like for me, it was dancing. I used to get tense about dancing. And because I was tense, I didn't think well, I didn't respond well, I was self-critical. There's a lot of things that happen to people when they get tense, and none of them are good. Not to mention the way they feel. People don't like to feel tense. So I'm defining stress as an internal experience, a feeling that you have, a feeling of pressure, a feeling of tension. And I'm saying that stress is not good for human beings the same way that colds are not good for human beings. Physical illnesses are not good for human beings. To illustrate what I mean by stress, to clarify it, I'd like to give you a metaphor that really highlights what I'm talking about. Imagine that you take a 3x5 board You lay it on the ground, and you ask people to walk over that board. Well, they're going to be skipping over it, and they're going to be doing somersaults over it. And it's nothing, and they enjoy it. It works out great. Okay? Now you take that board and you put it at 500 feet in the air. You take those same people and you ask them to walk over it. Well, all of a sudden, they're uncoordinated, they're clumsy, they're tight, they're tense, they're awkward. And you ask yourself, what happened here? You know, it's the same board. Their feet are the same size. Their body's exactly the same. Well, it's their mind. It's their thoughts. So when they're up there at 500 feet, they're thinking about how high they are, what's the consequence, and they feel this fear as a result of those thoughts. And maybe they're regretting that they went up there, and they feel that regret. And all of a sudden, all their thinking and the feelings that result interfere with their coordination with how their body is functioning. So they're having a very difficult time doing something that's actually quite easy for them. Now, occasionally, you might see someone walk across that board exactly the same as they did when it was on the ground. And if you interview them, you'll find out that it was the same to them. They didn't think about fearful thoughts and consequences and all that. And if you say to them, well, what did you think about? Well, I just thought about walking across the board. And you say to them, well, why was it so easy for you at 500 feet? And if they might say to you, well, it's the same board, it's the same feet, it's the same body, why wouldn't it be the same? Okay? So that's an example of how stress is an internally generated, and it's a feeling, and how it affects people in real time. You know how I said earlier that the reason that the health was so bad back in the 1800s and before that is because they didn't have the right model. They didn't have the right logic. They didn't really understand health and illness. So all their practices weren't right, and the way they tried to cure it isn't going to work. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that that's exactly what's happening with stress. Exactly the reason that there's so much stress and distress in the world is because the model that people are using is not an accurate model. It's not truthful. It's not right. So let me talk about the two models of stress.